right, I think we'll get going here. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll run through what we're going to talk about, but we have about an hour for this, for our presentation, our webinar here, talking about on-premise Hyperion EPM, where it is now and where's it going. We're going to be recording today's session, so if you want to come back in and, excuse me, if you want to come back in and review this, or if there's anybody else that within your organization you want to see this, obviously we'll be happy to share that. Will be posted on our website. From an overall standpoint, we're going to mute the phones, everyone's phones, so that we can make sure we run through all the material here. We've tried, what John and I have tried to do is leave enough time here so that we can make sure that there's a lot of time for Q&A at the end, understanding that there is a lot of different directions and a lot of ways people use this Hyperion EPM, and we want to make sure that we leave enough time for questions at the end, specific to the way you're using it. One other thing I'd like to plug a little marketing, so make sure to keep looking out for our other offerings, our other webinars on our webinar series that come out generally on a weekly basis. With that, we'll kind of get it kicked off here. From an agenda standpoint, we'll walk through the introductions, who I am, who John is, look at why EPM version matters, look at probably the most important thing, the thing that I'd suspect a lot of you are on the phone to hear, which is what's the timeline, what's the outlook on the versions from a on-prem perspective. Talk a little bit about what the options are, what some of those upgrade implications are, licensing considerations. We do want to talk a little bit about the cloud products, not so much because this is going to be a sales pitch, but because we need to know that overall what the strategic outlook is, what direction we're going, and then talk a little bit about overall what the next steps are and how you move towards your EPM roadmap overall. I think we know most of the folks on the phone today, but just because we're recording this, want to talk a little bit about who we are. So we're eCapital Advisors. We're looking to build long-term relationships with our clients. As we talk to specific clients, we're able to work with them to go beyond just the initial project, go beyond just that strict technical architecture, to move to that advisory role. So where we're able to help you understand what's the future, what's coming, because your jobs are your businesses, what you're doing on a day-to-day. Ours are to keep focused on that technology, but to keep that relationship overall so that we're able to assist and advise you on what we're doing. And that's this webinar today is kind of an example of that, and an example of what we've been doing a lot lately, which is talking to our clients to make sure that they're understanding, okay, what strategic direction we are, because we are in a time of rapid changes and rapid development of the cloud solution, of the on-prem solution, and there's just a lot of moving parts that we'd like to advise and make sure that people are up to date and understand that. Overall, we're established. We have 80-plus employees, teams based in 14 different states. We're growing quickly. Big one is we have 300 global customers, right? And we're always focused on success, and we're focused on that relationship. Overall, what we look at is we do a lot of different things. We do business advisory services. We do information management, strategic data governance, road mapping, predictive analytics, a lot of different things overall that we're working with our clients, from consolidations all the way to the analytics and BI as well. We work primarily with a number of different software vendors, from obviously Oracle here to IBM to OneStream to MicroStrategy, and a lot of different things from that as well. One big thing that we do as well is we focus on enabling our clients. A big part of that is obviously on the project, but another part of that is eCapital University. Get a little plug-in for eCapital University, developing and pushing those classes so that we can enable and give our end users and give our administrators the tool set and the knowledge to go forward and to be able to change and maintain and administer their tools themselves. we talk about industries. I mean, we have a wealth of information, a wealth of experience across different industries, from retail, healthcare. You can see it. We have a number of different logos within each of these, manufacturing, education, just to understand that we have a lot, with those 80 consultants, we have a lot of expertise across the industry, and we do a lot of internal communication and aligning from that perspective so that we can drive that, our experience can drive that overall and make your project more successful. We look at the next slide, which is our, we call it our NASCAR slide, but you can view these. We have a lot of different clients from all realms, all industries, but also all sizes as well. So the overall eCapital approach is really to engage with our clients and make sure that we're engaging and encountering these things together. We're informing you, we're allowing you to make those decisions that are going to make you successful, and understanding that a lot of times, a lot of businesses, I think all businesses are really changing over time. How do we adapt? How do we set up a strategic direction that is flexible, but understand that we will have to, we are always changing, we are always adapting to what those priorities are from a business challenge perspective or a business opportunity perspective, and moving forward from that concept. Overall, Josh Kincaid, so I'll introduce myself. John will jump in here in a minute. Senior Director with Oracle, the consolidation practice lead. I've been with eCapital around 9 years. My background started in actually accounting, transitioning into some of the technology. I was administrator of Hyperion tools, and then I moved into the consulting world. I've been around doing Hyperion experience for about, I think this slide maybe hasn't been updated, but about 18 years now, and focused primarily on consolidation, analytics, and planning over that time period. John, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm John Harvey. I'm the performance management practice lead. I've been working with S-based products or Hyperion products since, it says 13 years, but since about version 6.5, so long time. I came from an IT background, so my undergrad was in MIS, and I started out as a programmer, and then got involved with Hyperion and became more of a finance role. So I'm, I guess, IT backgrounded and now kind of a blend, and I've been with eCap for 8 years now. So that's a little bit about who we are. We just wanted to talk briefly about the focus of the webinar. So really what we want to talk about here is the on-prem roadmap and the, sort of the decision you're going to be faced with at some point down the road on, do I go to the cloud? What on-prem options are even available to me, and when will they be available? This is not a cloud pitch. So Josh mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about the cloud products. We're not going to go horribly in detail about them. We are not trying to sell you the cloud. There are a number of reps who I'm sure would be happy to give you the whole spiel on the cloud, and we would as well. So if you see something you're interested in or you'd just like to discuss it further, Josh and I are obviously available afterwards to talk through anything you may want to know, cloud or not. But just to stress it right up front, we are not trying to sell you the cloud. And I think that's maybe unique for a webinar nowadays, but that's where we're headed. So talk a little bit about why versions matter and what you get as you go through the on-prem versions here. So, as we look across 11.124 and we see, I'm looking at who's on the phone here. I know about half of you are on 11.124, half of you not, or I don't know. The functionality that came about in 1.2.4, from a planning S-based perspective was really, there's some end user stuff. Specifically, it introduced the non-classic interface, or the mobile-enabled interface, the one that looks more like the cloud. It wasn't full-on cloud, and it certainly had its share of challenges. But there was an introduction to a mobile-friendly interface, as well as new calc features, and definitely big enhancements to Calc Manager in terms of functionality. HFM, in 11.1.2, the dimensionality, the dim flexibility came in. The consolidation speed has drastically improved, and that's something that Josh will talk to in depth a little later on. FDMEE, was new to 1.2.3.500, if my memory serves me. But full rewrite from classic FDM with some of the same principles, allowing users to map. 1.2.4, I think there was some new mapping capabilities. Performance, every dot release is getting better and better. Not to say it's bad, it's just improving over dot release to dot release. So a lot of what we're seeing, or what we have seen drive people to the current version, is really server software or integration with IE or Office products. So one of the greater trends we're seeing across the marketplace is, customers coming to us and saying, John, IT just told me we're going to Windows 10. What does that mean? Or they're rolling out IE 11, or we're on Office 365 now. What version do we need to be on? Do I need to upgrade? So we're going to talk a little bit about, software versions, what they play nice with, as well as just the principle of now IT sort of indirectly driving some of these upgrades, and how to insulate yourself from that. And I think just starting out, we'll probably right now just talk about the CFO tool and the compatibility matrix and what those are. So losing control here. There we go. So the CFO tool is what they commonly call it the CFO tool. It's the cumulative feature overview tool. So what it is a website Oracle setup where you can select your products from a list. You can pick your current release of them and what release you would go to, or if you're unsure of the patch level you'd go to, you can just select the maximum number available there, and you can generate a report of what are the enhancements that came about from my release to that latest dot release, or what's different between .005 and .006. So talk a little bit about what this is and it isn't. So it does tell you the features that are new. So it'll tell you things like, I know it's kind of small on screen here, but use new settings to further customize the UI. So it'll tell you, a new feature and when it came about. What it won't tell you is the things that the readmes for a patch will tell you, like we fixed XYZ bug. So really, this is feature focused and not sort of bug fix focused, but it's a great site to know about. Now, people typically ask right after you show them, can you give me the URL for this? I can, but it moves around a lot, or it can move around. What I typically tell people is to Google Cumulative Feature Tool EPM, and it's typically the first result you see. That way, you're always getting the latest and greatest that's out there. Another useful tool that's out there is the compatibility matrix. And this will, and same type of thing, it's out there, it has a URL, but I always tell people Google Compatibility Matrix EPM, and you'll find the latest and greatest copy that is out on the Oracle Tech Network. What this does is it's an Excel workbook. It has a bunch of links. You click, you say I'm on 700, and you can click, and it'll tell you what databases are, work for, your release, or what Windows operating systems, that sort of thing. And it'll tell you, all of the software that is certified with your release. A couple points there. Certified, there are things that are beyond certified that will work. For instance, Firefox is not certified, but it does work with the right modifications. This just in general, there's sort of you say, well, then why would we have this webinar and talk to you guys about this stuff? They're not the most usable or friendly of tools. So, these things are a little clunky. They tend to have either too much technical detail, they're too down in the weeds, or they are too high level. So it tends to be kind of difficult to find exactly what you need. So Josh and I have summarized that up later in the deck here to help you out. So in both of these tools, you may need to know exactly what version you're on. And for the most part, people tend to know I'm on 11.123. But as we saw in some of these tools, you need to know, are you on .005 or .006? So you can find that out as a user by clicking, logging into Workspace and clicking this Help About. And if you click on the Show Details in the bottom right, it'll list out all of the products you have installed and what your specific release of those products are. So that's sort of a useful tip on how to find your exact version that you're working with. So let's talk a little bit about support. There are a couple different types of support. So we're going to talk about Oracle says support's ending. What does that mean? What happens if you go beyond that? So what Oracle means when they say support is ending is what they call Premier support is ending. So, we'll talk about the timelines for that, but Premier support really means that Oracle is actively and I guess proactively supporting this version. So right now, 11.124 is in Premier support. 1.2.3 has been extended through, Josh will get to the timelines, but the, Premier support is really they're finding bugs that customers report, they're developing fixes, and they're coming out with patches. So you'll see something like a .006 being released for products that are under Premier support. You'll also see them covered in the security alert. So if your IT staff or if you get an email that has a quarterly security update from Oracle, and it lists a whole bunch of things that look like CVE-1234, those are security bulletins that Oracle puts together for products that are under Premier support. Now, there's also, extended support, which means Premier support has ended and you are now paying extra for extended support. So you're not going to get some of these features with extended support. You're getting they're not doing proactive dot releases. You do get the ability to enter SRs for a product and have Oracle help you fix them. But you're not getting anything beyond just kind of bare bones support. And you're also paying extra for that. This is typically what folks do when they've gone beyond the Premier support window, is pay for extended support. It's a lot like sustaining support. Sustaining support, though, is really something you'll hear used for a product that is going away. EPMA is a product that is under sustaining support. So again, what that doesn't include, new updates, fixes, security stuff, and the critical patches. And they will not, so a new version of IE comes out, they won't be updating extended or sustaining support products to work with the new IE. Typically when you've gone beyond the Premier support window, you are going to be forced to upgrade by some other product other than Hyperion at some point. Be that a Workday upgrade is causing an IE upgrade is causing you to upgrade. So something like that is something we see customers having to do nowadays. Josh, anything to add on that?
No. So now we'll get into kind of the overall timeline, options, and implications here, and what that means. Overall, this is I would suspect what a lot of folks are really here to see. If we take a look at the first slide here, it's really looking at the support timeline outlook. And before I talk in a little bit more detail on this, I do want to say that this is as we know it today, right? So this is what we've heard from Oracle. This is a direction we've talked to them about, whether it's through partner relationships, whether it's at K-scopes and conferences of that nature, and talking to their product managers. But that is to say, every time you talk to Oracle, like I'm sure that you've heard, is they do everything within a safe harbor, essentially saying this is as we know it today, but we're not making promises. So obviously, this being Oracle, we can only tell you what we know, but the direction we've seen going forward. So if we take a look at this fairly simple timeline here. 11.1, that was done, it was done a while ago, right? So essentially, if you're on 11.1, you've been in sustaining support for multiple years, and it's time to start evaluating it and seeing, like John's saying, a lot of times those folks that we see on 11.1, whatever, there are substantial functional releases, but probably even a bigger risk is that you're going to run into an update within one of your other, within your server, within some of your integrations with the other tools that are going to impact what you're doing in there. Like John's mentioned, excuse me, the Premier support for 11.1.2 or 11.1.2, all of them, 11.1.2.3 to 4, those all end in December 2020. That was extended. It was December 2018. We had, I think that Oracle got some feedback from a lot of folks saying, okay, we need a path, an on-prem path forward. They were clearly very focused on the cloud and still are, but that's now been extended to December 2020. If we talk about 11.1.2.3, they're actually, from an update and a patching perspective, they're only working on Step 1, which is the production impact, Step 1 tickets or support requests through the end of 2019, I believe it is. They will fully support 11.1.2, 11.1.2 whatever, 11.1.2.4 through December 2020. The big thing is, okay, what are we going to do there? So what we've heard from them is 11.2 is going to be released. And the big thing that we heard in the June-July timeframe is there is a roadmap and there is a path forward for the on-prem solution through what now they're saying is around 2030. That's obviously kind of a round number, but that's important to understand that that Oracle is committed to their on-prem folks. Like we'll talk a little bit later about what that means, but committed to their on-prem clients. The expectation for 11.2 is right now January 2019 from a release date perspective. Now, what I will say is there's a number of updates to this. The 11.2 version is going to be released January 2019. Obviously, when we look at that, that gives you a number of months to do your upgrade, do your conversion to that new version. but it is important, I think, for everyone to be thinking strategically from that direction to say, okay, how do I get there? What if there are delays to Oracle's timeline, which I don't want to say there often are, but there sometimes are delays to their release schedules, and how does that impact me? So I think it's one of those things that we've been telling folks, listen, don't wait and plan on, last minute kind of coming in and getting this done. Plan strategically and understand, okay, this is the plan overall as far as how we migrate, how we upgrade to that new version, that 11.2 version overall. We won't go into real deep, and I think we don't really touch on it much within this version, which is what are the upgrades, what are the enhancements, what's the new functionality within 11.2. A lot of what we've heard thus far is kind of back-end type database interactivity tools on the back end, which won't necessarily have giant impacts on the front end, but in the end, there is the concept here, and we'll get into it in a couple slides about saying when does the functionality, let's say some new functionality that has been developed on the cloud, when does that or does that move to the on-prem?
So one quick note on that, Josh, if you could go back one. Just to say it explicitly, given the timeline Oracle has stated, if you want to stay on Premier support, there's a 24-month window in which to execute an upgrade, and that is January 2019 to December 2020, assuming Oracle releases on time. So, and this is my personal opinion, this if you're looking to stay on Premier support, this needs to be in your your 18 or 19 budget or plans for projects.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. We look at what are some of the options here, right? Let's say you're on 11.123, you're on 11.124, or you're on 11.1. What can you do, right? So obviously, first option is do nothing. There's limited or no investment. Obviously, that's excluding extended support, like John spoke about before. You can pay additional amount to get extended support beyond the listed support time frame. It's the highest risk, right? Why is there risk there? Well, there's risk related, obviously, to items, not necessarily new functionality, right? Because you're operating within your current functionality set, but there's risks around your server getting updated. There's risks around different environmental changes from that perspective. It's essentially you're running in a world where there are no patches, and you're willing to accept that risk to be functioning from that perspective. The next area is the upgrade, right? So this is kind of traditionally where our on-prem folks have lived and will live in the future, which is upgrade, right? So there's investment required. That investment really depends on the current version and the tool set, right? And one of the things we say around that is, all right, what effort, how much can we leverage LCMs? The newer the version you're on, the better that transition and those utilities tend to work. If you're on 11.1, it's obviously going to be a lot harder to go from 11.1x to 11.1.1 to 11.2 because a lot of those updated, like we saw before, those scripts to do your upgrades are not being supported from that perspective. What's the benefit? Obviously, you maintain Premier support. Obviously, from that perspective, we also have future upgrades, right? So there's 11.2 now, which is supposed to be released in January 2019. 11.1 or 11.2.1, right? 11.2.2, 11.2.3. There will be future upgrades related to that. Just like there is now, there'll be future upgrades. The other thing that can have an impact here is looking at delays in functional improvements. So the focus Oracle has, for right or wrong, is to develop functional improvements for the cloud first and to roll those to the on-prem solution later. What that quote-unquote later means, it can be up for debate, right? So one thing to understand is the focus is going to be on cloud for functional improvements. The on-prem focus is going to be around keeping those patches supported and not necessarily functionality first. One of the big ones that's not a bullet, that's a bullet down under the cloud is really looking at testing cycles, and we'll talk about that as we get into a few bullets here on the cloud. So one thing to understand is the cloud is a conversion or a rebuild, not a migration, right? We can leverage a lot of the structures, a lot of the processes, but it is a rebuild. It's not a straight migration. Obviously, there's licensing implications related to that. We'll talk about that more specifically later, but the on-prem solution is a perpetual license with maintenance fee. This is a more cloud pay-as-you-go license implication. Functionality, there are different functionality focuses here. We'll get into the more specifics on that, but if we look at the consolidation, there's different functionalities there. The planning S-Base side tends to be a little bit more straightforward in how that works. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, once you get to the cloud, there's no upgrades required. No, because what happens is they're continually improving that product itself. So there's no major upgrades and investment in those upgrades required. However, that does change your testing cycle, right? So now within the cloud, you're not able to fully control exactly when you do that next version. There's a consistent developed calendar and how they release those. So we haven't seen it being more testing. It's just changing the way the testing works, right? And what I mean by that is you're going to do more kind of continual, smaller testing, as opposed to your upgrades. You do large effort around that upgrade and testing that. So it's not necessarily more testing. It's probably the same to a little bit less testing because it's smaller incremental releases, but it is a change in how people are managing that testing. Consolidation migration impacts. So what does this mean? So there's when you were doing an upgrade, whether we can use copy applications, whether we can use lifecycle management, whether we have to rebuild, reload, those type of things, right? So those are going to be your biggest drivers when you thought, how much effort is my HFM upgrade going to be? Along with that, and oftentimes most people that use HFM use FDM. FDM is no longer available. It's been sunsetted as of 11.123.500, I believe, and your processes would need to be rebuilt in FDM EE, like John talked about before. There's a lot of benefits to FDM EE. The biggest thing to understand from that perspective is much improved functionality. There's also scripting. The scripting has changed within that. The language has changed from VB script to Jython. The other thing is mapping, and a lot of times what we use historically for VB script can actually be done natively within FDM EE now, which allows us to move away from those scripts and allow that to be a lot more end-user managed or administrator managed rather than having to understand that VB script overall. So we're seeing a lot of successful transitions to that FDM EE, but it's one thing to understand. I won't go real deep into these. I think that most folks on the phone are already updated past this, but you can look at this as we release this later. 11.122, the big thing there was we can now do custom dimensions. There's faster data retrieval times. 11.123 has been a lot of looking at end user and how they're interacting with it, whether it's smart view, or whether it's hiding or showing dimensions within your POV. 11.124, like I said, we could talk about this, but essentially it's what we've done is a lot of back-end work on 11.124 to make things significantly faster, right? So what we're able to do is leverage a multi-core for consolidations and also for data retrieves and metadata loads overall. It's really improved timing and how quickly people are able to consolidate data. I'll let you take a look at this. This is obviously validation of what's been going on from that perspective. We can take a look at it, but there's been substantial performance gains depending on how people are doing it. So this is outside of even changing the way your rules work. It's just literally the engine and what's running it. You can see there's been significant changes and improvements on consolidation times. Obviously, anytime you see something like this, it's really specifically related to that specific instance. But in the end, from what we've seen overall is as we work with different clients, a substantial improvement in time and how that in consolidation times improving. As we get into this, I'm talking a little bit faster to make sure we have time at the end for some Q&A. But really looking at key benefits of the FDM EE that I've talked about is really its interface is consistent with planning, so it's in the workspace. It's improved there. It leverages the ODI engine, so it has improved performance. If you guys were ever on FDM, you had separate maintenance of those security groups. There's also additional mapping options, like I talked about before, to ideally move away from that VB script world, especially multi-dimensional mapping. That's a big one that we've seen historically in the marketplace, but move to that functional mapping within the tool itself. There's a migration utility, moving FDM to FDM-EE, obviously a big part of that. One key thing to understand here is, excuse me, one key thing is we see a couple hubs that have been developing, whether it's on-prem or on cloud. And John's going to go into the next one in a minute. But what our data movement, our ETL or ELT tool that we see Oracle focusing on and moving forward with is FDM-EE, right? So FDM-EE is that way to extract, to transform, map it, and then load that. And what we've seen Oracle do is focus on this FDM as one of the critical hubs to allow people to transition over time, whether it's staying on-prem or whether it's on the cloud, but really that tool that allows us to move that data around and between the different applications so that we're able to have that minimal delay and latency from a time perspective.
So on that note, the other sort of hub is, we have FDM-EE for data, DRM for metadata. These are really meant to be sort of core to your environment, whether you're cloud or on-prem, or whether you're both. So they're really meant to be this sort of hub and spoke, type of system. And we see this as a great thing to move towards if you're an on-prem customer, just because if you're in FDM-EE, if you're in DRM, these are two things we know aren't going to be changing, and will help you, we'll integrate with cloud, we'll integrate with on-prem, and if you go to move at a later date, this will make your project much easier, right? You're just choosing a new target and you're pushing your data, or you're choosing a new target and you're pushing your metadata. From an on-prem perspective, and I'm going to go through this really fast, DRM, some of the new features, the DRG module, which is data relationship governance. It's really like an Outlook inbox for the administrator that has a bunch of, people submit a metadata change, and the administrator can approve it, can modify it, and push it back to them. It's really workflow around metadata. They also have analytics, so you can tell, get some dashboards about your hierarchy and what's happening with it, how many changes are coming through, what are the types of change, how static are things, and you see their, trends over time as well. This is built right into the product starting in 124.340, I believe. For Essbase, really, the big piece has been hybrid. That's was new with 123.500, but much improved in 124. There were a couple new calc features, fixed parallel and create block. Fixed parallel in a unique set of circumstances can really make a difference in your calc speeds. It sort of tells the engine to break up the tasks and how it processes them differently than it would have, and that can, in certain circumstances, make a big difference. You know, we've seen some big improvements at some of our customers with hybrid. For as one example, you know, we have a Consolidated Communications, a client of ours. They had a nightly process that took 6 hours. We brought it down to 14 minutes by using hybrid. Just doing a lot of allocations with a very, very big BSO cube that we moved to hybrid. You know, 124, we mentioned the improvements to hybrid. That's really the big win with 124. You know, support a time balance, dynamic time series, and just kind of overall, you know, overall performance of hybrid as well. Planning's recent enhancements, you know, a lot of them are sort of end user focused. You know, we talked a little bit at the beginning about the what they call the mobile friendly interface. You know, we didn't see that widespread adoption on that, but it's you know, you can get a feel for where the tool's going and where it will likely be on future releases. There's increased support for ASO plan types. You can write back to them only at level 0. You know, as well as some new stuff for SmartView, specifically the Planning Administrator add-in, which lets you retrieve, for a classic planning app only, not an EPMA app, retrieve metadata just like you retrieve data with SmartView. So you would, you know, zoom in on the dimension, and it would tell you all, instead of the data point, tell you all the properties for a member, which makes it really easy and slick for updating, you know, a ton of members. You know, you can see that use case of, you know, people didn't set the data storage property right on a sparse dimension or on your account dimension. You want to go through as the administrator and sort of bulk update. It's a really slick tool for that. The little bit about the planning, this is what that mobile-friendly interface looks like. It looks a lot like cloud, but is sort of the 1.0 version. And there's some small improvements to or small changes to the interface, you know, like entering 5K or 5M, plus 100, minus 100 to adjust numbers. And yeah, more about the simplified interface. FR, you know, I know we're coming close to the end of the hour, so I'm kind of going to breeze through some of this. FR has a, you know, it can be accessed from mobile. What you're looking at in this screenshot is FR on an iPad. So it renders sort of in a familiar interface there. They rewrote a lot of this to work in HTML5, which sort of makes it device independent. As well as FR came out with a web-based studio, which now has full parity with the desktop client. And I think they're, at least in the cloud, they've retired the desktop client in favor of the web studio. So, you know, as we look to the future, that'll certainly, you know, I think continue with the on-prem. SmartView, recently they've had a lot of releases in the .700 series. I know some of you on the phone have recently asked about it. .700, .710, they're, you know, advertising a lot of Office 365 support. That's, I think, where a lot of the dot releases recently have come out to be Office 365 fixes and things like that. You know, as with any of these, test before you roll it out to your user base. I think right now we've seen the .700 be more stable than the .710 when it comes to Office 365. And one thing to note on that, Office 365 is only supported as a desktop installed product, not a web-based, which is something people ask a lot. There's a screenshot of that Planning Administrator extension that I mentioned earlier. There's also something in SmartView for diagnostics that'll help you work with support in the new Smart Views. Next, we'll talk about licensing. So Josh mentioned earlier, there's a difference between the cloud and the on-prem license. The on-prem license, you buy the tool. You say, hey, we're going to have a Planning Plus with 100 users, and you say it's $100,000. You're going to pay 22% in maintenance every year. So that's kind of their pricing model, is just you buy the software, you pay a percentage of typically a non-negotiable percentage for support and maintenance beyond that. What we've seen is new licenses are hard to come by. All the reps are compensated on cloud revenue. They don't tend to pay much mind to the on-prem, and actually on-prem licensing, they're trying to move it to a store. What we don't know about is typically they have a list price and no one pays the list price. So, you negotiate a discount off of the list. What happens when it moves to a store and there's no rep to call and no discount to negotiate? I don't know if that means everyone moves to a fixed price that's less than list, or if you still have a rep, they're just an inside rep supporting many more clients than you. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but what we've heard is they're going to try to move it to an online marketplace for any on-prem new license purchases. As of today, I believe it is still reach out to your rep, who's probably going to tell you about cloud, but reach out to your rep. They can sell you on-prem licensing. Cloud licensing is it's per person, per app, per month. So I think the list price on, let's say, PBCS is $120 per person, per app, per month. What we've seen is, it's similar to the on-prem stuff where Oracle gives discounts off of list. But if you go to do the math on what will my license cost be, you can't really just take the list and multiply it by users and apps and months to get a list price, or to get a price that you would pay. Your rep has significant leverage in pricing this. So if you have a user that has access to one app, let's say you get a 25% discount on their license. If that user needs to access a second app, they typically give a much steeper discount on that second app license. So it's really difficult. I guess the point being is, if you are evaluating moving to the cloud and you're evaluating what the cost of ownership is, you really need to get a rep to give you a quote to know what your full cloud estimate would be. It's really not possible, even from a partner perspective, to know, given a certain number of apps and users and months, what price they'd come up with. There's also, some let's say contract structure-based things. How long are you signing up for? And how many users do you have? That type of thing will give you some leverage there. One thing to know is we typically advise our clients, no matter what length, if you're going to try to get an option thrown in there where you maximize price increase after contract. So you say, and price won't change by more than X% in the years following, or something like that. With Essbase Cloud or Oracle Analytics Cloud, they have a new model called metered usage. So you can purchase the product as an enterprise license. You can purchase it, metered. So it's like Amazon Web Services, for those of you familiar with that, where you can pay as you go. You want to spin up an app, so you say, all right, I want to use this. I create an app, I load it with data, I do my reporting, I throw that app away, I'm not being charged anymore. So you can pay an hourly rate or a daily rate for metered usage, they call it. The the pricing depends on whether you're using, which flavor of OAC you're using. And they do make you purchase an initial block. So you can't just say, create me an account. I want to play with it for 5 or 10 hours. What they'll say is, buy 500 and come back to me for another 500. So they do sell the hours in blocks, but you can sign up for a metered usage. Cloud offerings, we said we'd kind of breeze over these. In the interest of time and providing some time for Q&A, I think we're just going to skip over cloud. There is a product called FCCS. There is a product called EPBCS. They are both great products. What we would recommend is that the cloud is something that's built with best-in-practice processes. The cloud tools as they stand today are great for companies that don't have a given process. They're meant for you to change your process to them, which is different than the on-prem where you modify the tool to meet what you do. PBCS being the exception to that, it's very flexible. But EPBCS has process built in. FCCS has process built in. They're looking to make those things more flexible in the future, but as it stands now, if you've been a long-time HFM customer, FCCS is going to feel very boxed in for you as it stands today. And with that, I will hand it over to Josh here for kind of final thoughts on roadmap.
Yeah, so from that perspective, really what we're seeing is each organization has their own roadmap, and it's really going to be based off of how you're using the tool. And one example that John kind of gave right there is if you were ever looking to move from an HFM to an FCCS, you have to look at more of how you're using HFM and how it would fit within the tool. But it's true of everyone in evaluating that, right? We work often with folks to develop that strategic roadmap. A big part of that is really assessing where they're at today from a technical architecture standpoint. Also functionally, how are you using the day-to-day? And another big one is what's your data integration? How does that work? So it's really generally we're looking at that and we're saying, well, what is the effort related to that? And it's really based on the complexity of your Hyperion EPM environment. How many tools you're using, how many data processors there are, quite a few different things like that. But in the end, really what we're seeing and what we've seen is we're really highly recommended, don't wait until someone else picks your analytical tool for you. And what I mean by that is we're seeing folks within the IT organization, as you'd imagine, moving to more of a cloud world, right, where everything is hosted. I shouldn't say everything, but a lot more items are hosted via the cloud. One thing that we're seeing people run into is people are saying, my IT department says by next year we're going to have all of our applications are going to be on the cloud. Well, it's critical to understand whether it's consolidations, whether it's planning, whether it's some other analytical processes. How does that work with what you're doing to make sure you understand? So we're telling people it makes sense to figure that out, look at that strategic roadmap, understand the functionality today, leverage us and what we know in our relationship and how we're looking at that so that we can make sure that you're ready so that when IT comes to you and says, okay, we're going to move to the cloud, that you're informed and you have that direction forward. And ideally, even within that, we're able to engage IT and say, what is that appetite? What is that? How strong is that push to get people, get all the applications hosted in the cloud environment? Or is there opportunity to stay within an on-premise solution, which we're actually seeing some pushback from that perspective to see more people saying, you know what, I understand that the world's moving to the cloud, but we're going to stay on-prem. Now with that, I will say we don't have a lot of time here for Q&A, but John, what's the best way to open this up for Q&A?
I can take back control. I think, unmute everyone. There we go. Everyone has been unmuted. I I know we're right at time here. Any questions from attendees?
Hi, I do have a question about cloud-based licensing.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if, in your experience, if you've seen any clients who have negotiated something or have a situation where they are turning licenses on and off. For example, if we wanted to have many people participate in a budgeting process for just 1 month of the year, but not necessarily have access to the rest of the system. Have you seen any situations with customers in the cloud like that?
So we have not, I will say I haven't had a lot of customers come and ask for that, but we did ask. You know, I was on a project where a customer said, you know, we want to have everyone be able to access reporting, you know, log in and get their report, but just reports and just these days of the month. What Oracle will push back on is say, all right, let's buy a license for everyone, and given your usage profile, we'll discount the licenses for you. So, you know, what you see is the rep, they don't flex away from everyone needing to have a license, but they don't do turn it on, turn it off, so they'll exercise some discretion in pricing the license.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks everyone for your time, and if you have any other questions or you want to see some demos about products or talk about your specific situation, anyone at eCapital Advisors, Josh and myself are always willing and able to help you out.
Hey, John and Josh, this is Guy Collins, but are you just by default going to send information on getting this recording out to everyone who attended and their emails, or do we need to ask for it specifically?
Yep, I believe we have an email that will go out to everyone who registered on how to access this recording afterwards. Bob,
yes,
you've done more webinars than me. Is that the case?
Yeah, there'll be a link on the eCapital site that will hold the recording here, and then since you attended, we'll make sure to send out that link exactly where that recording is going to be stored on our eCapital website.
All right.
All righty. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, you too.